We're going to get into a Bears-Browns Week 3 of the NFL preseason preview in just a moment with everything to watch for and key bubble players. But first, we are competitive here at Chat Sports, and between our Browns and Bears YouTube channels, we are losing in the subscriber race this week. Not by much, though. We still have time to overtake them and win before kickoff. So if you love the Browns and you want Browns YouTube coverage, go ahead and subscribe today. Today's Cleveland Browns report is presented to you by Aura, an all-in-one digital safety company that helps to keep your wallet and your identity secure while you are online. They've got so many awesome benefits for the dog pound, including a 14-day free trial that we'll tell you more about later on in the show. But speaking of today's show, it's the preseason finale. Chicago comes to town. I, for one, hope it is much like the last time these two teams squared off at FirstEnergy Stadium, although you will probably not be seeing Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney play. Now, quick disclaimer, I should have said it a little earlier. We are filming this preview during our live watch party, our live show every Thursday at 4 Eastern. So if a detail or two changes from now until this gets posted, bear with us. We're sorry for any inconvenience. We're just trying to get as much content out to all of you guys watching as possible. But here's what the big topics for today's show are. We're going to look at kind of a guide for the game, storylines to watch for, things to keep an eye on as the game progresses, and then 5 bubble players that really need to bring it this Sunday to do what they can to secure a roster spot. But first guy I'm watching for, you guessed it, it is Jacoby Brissett. Why? Because for the first time, we get to see Brissett suit up and play for the Cleveland Browns in a live game. Will he play that much? Most likely not. I am predicting right now 3 series, right? That's what Deshaun Watson played in the first game. I'm guessing it'll be similar for Jacoby Brissett. I won't say exactly a quarter, because if they're in the middle of a drive and it goes into the second quarter, it might dip into that. But Stefanski, following Thursday's practice, said Brissett and a lot of other starters will be playing in this final preseason matchup. Now, we have not seen Jacoby Brissett so far in the NFL preseason. Stefanski has sat him and other players through the first 2 weeks. But we're talking about the starting quarterback for weeks 1 through 12, the first 11 games. Here's what I want to get across loud and clear. No matter what happens in this game with Jacoby Brissett, do not overreact and do not panic. If he has a bad throw, if he throws an interception or a fumble, do not believe that the world is ending. It is preseason football. He's most likely not playing with all 11 starters on offense. Plus, it's his first game. The nature of preseason, I think, gets lost on people sometimes. It's supposed to be a tune-up. It's supposed to be to work out the kinks. This is when you want to see mistakes happen. Now, you don't want to see too many mistakes because this is NFL, not AYSO soccer. But if a mistake or two happens, do not freak out. Do not panic. It is going to be okay here. Now, while we're talking about the Browns and the Bears, who do you got in this game, right? The Browns are now 1-1 in the preseason. I really don't care about preseason records whatsoever. Trying to think of the last preseason Browns team that went 4-0 and how that worked out for them. But let me know who you got in this one, whether it's the Browns or the Bears. Next thing I am watching for, 2 inside linebackers, Tony Fields and Jacob Phillips. 5th-round pick and a 3rd-round pick that unfortunately have been running into injuries for much of their career. One guy has had a better preseason than the other. In my opinion, they are not locks to make this roster, so they definitely have to show up a little bit here. But before we do a deep dive on their play so far, our proud sponsor today, Aura, has a 14-day free trial. Now, Aura's got a handful of great benefits here. They will keep your credit card, your debit card, and your identity secure and protected for you when you're on the web here. And let's face it, it's 2022. We do everything online at this point, so you got to start being smart online. You got to start being safe. You don't want to be a statistic and be one of tens of millions of Americans who have their identity or have their credit card compromised every single year. Start that 14-day free trial. Aura.com/chatsports. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. let's get back to talking about Jacob Phillips and Tony Fields. So Phillips so far in the preseason, we haven't seen much of him, but what we have seen has not been pretty. I mean, this is just the PFF grades, so take that what you will, because I like PFF to a degree. Sometimes I think they're a little bit cuckoo, but it has not been pretty, right? 28.3 overall, bad run defense, and when you're a 6'4", 6'5", 230-pound linebacker, that's supposed to be kind of your bread and butter, right? That's supposed to be where you make your money. Now, Tony Fields is someone that is maybe, I wouldn't say lost, but fifth-round pick out of West Virginia that maybe just isn't talked about a ton as being a real part of this linebacker room, but he's been sneaky goodish so far this preseason. Haven't seen a ton of him, so it's really hard to give these concrete like statements and vows of this guy's been awesome, except for like Jerome Ford. He has been awesome. But other players, you got to take that what you will. For example, Tony Fields, the defensive tackles have not been doing wonders for these linebackers, so you're seeing a lot of offensive linemen get to the second level and prohibit them from making plays. But when we look at this linebacker depth chart here, I'm guessing the Browns are going to take 5 linebackers. Joe Woods wants to run a lot of 2 linebacker sets. Does he really need 6 linebackers when for the most part he plays 2? Maybe, but it would have to be because Tony Fields and Jacob Phillips and Dakota Allen all are just impossible to cut, right? They all look too good, so they have to keep them on the roster. Because you know the 3 guys on screen right now are all going to be on this final roster. JOK, Walker, and Taki. So can Phillips, Fields, and even Dakota Allen, a nice player who's been doing some great work so far through 2 preseason games, make their case in this final preseason game? Next thing I am watching for is the battle for the last defensive end spot. This has been one of the, I don't think going into preseason, many people were talking about this position group in the battle for it. But we've seen some awesome plays so far from a handful of guys who are trying to crack this roster. Because when you think about the defensive end room, and we'll look at it in a little bit, it's kind of crowded. Now, we haven't seen Chase Winovich lately. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. He played in the Jags game, nothing in the Eagles game. The opposite for Isaiah Thomas, the rookie, 7th-round pick out of Oklahoma, who started his NFL preseason career off with a bang, right? 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. And then the free agent signing, Isaac Rochelle, who's had 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss, and has probably been just the most steady because we've seen him play through 2 preseason games. But the other 2 guys have been dealing with injuries. Now, like I was saying, when we look at this defensive line here, everyone on screen's a roster lock, but let's just focus on the defensive ends. Garrett, Clowney, and Alex Wright, they absolutely have a spot on this roster. Are the Browns going to take 4 or 5 defensive ends? If they go 5, it's a battle between Winovich, between Isaiah Thomas, and Isaac Rochelle. So which of those 5 guys, which of those 3 guys, which 2 gets that last spot? And they only go 4 defensive ends. Who would it be here? Because Winovich is a player that Andrew Berry traded for. You got to envision he wants to see him play real football, play in the regular season before kind of giving up on him. Isaiah Thomas has been probably at the biggest, best moment so far, 2 sacks in the first game, but it is just preseason, so don't read too much into stats. And then Rochelle's probably been the most consistent. So all 3 guys have a pretty good case. The issue is I just don't see him taking 6 defensive ends. All right, next part of today's show, 5 roster bubble players to watch. Sort of like what we were just talking about a moment ago, but kind of giving you some more names to keep an eye on for, because ultimately, when the preseason game kicks off, you can look and see how JOK and maybe Grant Delpit play, but their spot is secured. They can play great. They could have a bad game. It's not going to really have much of an impact for me. Now, first roster bubble player I'm watching for is Josh Rosen, evidently, because I guess this is something to keep an eye on. Josina Anderson had a tweet just not long ago saying, keep an eye on how things are going with quarterback Josh Rosen in Cleveland. Now, Josina's been pretty tapped into the Browns organization, so when she puts tweets out like this, I think there is some sort of truth to it. She's not doing it to troll us here, but what do we have to watch for? The movie has not been a good movie so far. It sucked, okay? Sorry, Rosen. 13 for 27, $144. again, when you go out in the fourth quarter and you play with all backups, it's hard to have awesome stats. But also, when you go up against the other team's all backups, you're supposed to have a decent showing in performance, right? So that's why it's a little bit of like, no, like have a little bit of faith of, or I believe that maybe Josh Rosen could do some good stuff here. So we'll keep an eye on him. Stefanski said after Thursday's presser that Rosen is expected to play. I don't think he's got a real shot for this backup quarterback position behind Jacoby Brissett. Now, there are some Josh Rosen truthers out there, or he's got a ton of burners, and he just keeps them all firing at all cylinders. The latter might be more true. But who do you think is the better quarterback? This has got to be a slam dunk. I feel bad even asking this question. Is it Josh Dobbs or is it Josh Rosen? Next two players to watch for here. I'm going to kind of quickly lump them together because we just spoke about Isaiah Thomas. But hopefully, again, we are recording this Thursday afternoon. That hand injury, it looks like he's on a path to play. You might have an update by the time you're watching this. If he is out there, I'll be watching for him. But Mike Harley Jr., UDFA out of the U, who's a record holder, actually, at Miami. Believe it or not, he is the all-time reception leader for the Hurricanes, and he is in a big battle for the last wide receiver spot here. When we look at this depth chart here, all four guys locks on screen. And then I think Michael Woods is. Michael Woods was one of the most impressive receivers to start camp. Unfortunately, a nagging hamstring injury has sidelined him for longer than he would like, but I think the Browns are going to stick by him. And so that's 5 right there. Now we battle for 6. Jamarcus Bradley, Mike Harley Jr., Javon Wims. Harley is a guy to keep an eye on for. I haven't talked about him too much on the show, so this is sort of my way of maybe apologizing to Harley because he's deserved more airtime. I mean, he didn't have much of an impact at all in the first preseason game, but last week against the Eagles, 3 receptions, 30 yards. I think every single preseason, every fan for all 32 NFL teams finds one UDFA at the wide receiver position and is like, watch out for this dude. We all do it. My guy this year was Isaiah Weston. An ACL injury ruined that, that run there. But Harley Jr. has been a popular guy so far in Berea, so watch out for him at FirstEnergy this Saturday. Now, speaking of this Saturday here, will you be joining our live Browns versus Bears watch party here? Type me if you will be. We'd love to have you aboard, giving live play-by-play, having fun, having some Bud Lattes, some Coors Lattes with you guys here. Free sponsor right there. But, hey, click on the thumbnail when you see it on YouTube. It is right here. It looks just like this. Click on it and have a blast with us here at the Browns Report. You can have the game on your TV too, but you can also join our Dog Pound community over here. Join us this Saturday. We'll be getting going right before kicking off at 7 Eastern. The next player I am watching for is maybe one of the most surprising players. I don't think anyone really tapped Nakia Griffin-Stewart as must-see TV going into preseason. I mean, when we talked about deep tight ends, it was all about the Texas Tech basketball player Marco Santos Silva. No one was talking about Griffin-Stewart, the guy at a Pitt, who has been the most impressive tight end so far. Granted, we haven't seen much of Njoku or Bryant, but he's looked better than Forrestall, in my opinion. So could we see a changeup right there? I had him making my 53-man roster projection. Hope he balls out against the Bears and proves me correct, because this is a tight end room that long-term, outside of Njoku, it's a little bit unknown and gray. So if you can find a hidden gem in the preseason to be that next, or you hope for, an Austin Hooper, works for me. Final player I'm watching for is DeAnthony Bell. We're on the UDFA train here, but DeAnthony Bell has just been fan-freaking-tastic in the secondary. And he has been so noteworthy, he might steal a job from Richard LeCounte, who was kind of that safety last year, right? Remember those games last year? How great he looked? DeAnthony Bell, right now, in the thick of it. When you look at this depth chart here for the safety room, he is battling with Delpit Johnson. He's battling with LeCounte. Ronnie Harrison is a name that I think is safe on this roster. I don't think he's a lock, though. So, DeAnthony Bell, he had the forced fumble against the Jags. If you're like, who was that guy again? It was the fourth quarter. I didn't recognize any of these players. That was DeAnthony Bell. Watch out for him. He has been probably the best player outside of like Martin Emerson, who had the pick 6 week 1, so far in the secondary. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for our Browns versus Bears preview. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Make sure you join us for our live watch party here at the channel. We'll be getting going 15 minutes before kickoff, so join us over there, and we'll see you then.